Like,
Okay. Yeah, here we are. Which one's Curly, which one's Larry, and which one's Mo? Um, so when Roger and I were talking ahead of time, I asked Roger if he would start with the kind of discontinuity he and I had when I first asked him to contribute. And we had a very different understanding of what this was all about. And it was, I thought it was a great understanding. So a great misunderstanding, which led to a great understanding. So Roger remembered it better than I did. So I'm gonna ask you to tell the short story, Roger.
Yeah, well, I remember contributing to Humanity at Work, and then your next project came along, Gender Crap, and I thought, oh yeah, what a great title. It sort of hit me as a play on gender gap. I saw there was an opportunity to talk about how the gender gap isn't as wide or indeed existent as we might often think it is. So gender crap was a kind of idea that immediately struck me as a way of talking about differences that do divide us but needn't necessarily. And then I sat on it a while, and I thought, oh, hang on a minute, Mac. What are you really up to here, mate? What's really going on here? Because what began to occur to me was this could start as a title, it could start to imply that any conversation about gender is crap, which was very, very different to my initial positive response to it. Which is when I got on email and said, Mac, let's have a chat. me and Ted here are not happy about this, and we need to work it out. So I think we had a really good exchange about that and about how the idea had come to you as you awoke one morning and it felt right. It had lots of spin-offs to it, but it felt right. And what raised my comfort level was the subtitle, which was Stories of Illusion, Expectation, and Redemption. And that couched the title in a language that I felt comfortable to write to and to talk about, because I didn't want to get onto an advocacy train saying that, this is all about transgender or male versus female, or I didn't want to get onto a train that was going to that particular destination. And you assured me this was not about that. So I was willing to contribute on that basis.
Not only
is that how you remember it?
No, it is much better than I remember it. Only in the sense that it's much more accurate than the way I remember it. I remember things generally formlessly, but emotionally and spiritually. So I remembered that feeling of what? And followed by the oh, and followed by the that's better. I mean, that was what struck me about it. Well, and then you wrote your piece and you submitted it, and I was swept up. I mean, everything that everybody has contributed has blown my mind, because when I first thought of this as an idea, I may have told you, I just started talking to people about it. This was a decade ago. And some people said, oh, yeah, oh, boy, I want to talk. Some people said, it's not an issue for me, but my bullshit alarm rang. It was like, oh, it's not an issue for me. How about this weather? I was like, yeah, right. And then the third group said, absolutely not. And you can't make me talk about this. So there's stuff here.
You knew there was resonance when you got through responses like that.
Yeah. And I've got my own stuff about this, and everybody I know does. And I was telling Roger that I was on a Facebook page, which is not my page. Somebody else has started another gender crap page. And that's all these people weighing in about how transgender is a conspiracy, and all this big heavy political stuff about that. So what I like about everything that's in the book as it will be published is there's none of that. There is none of the, this is the way it ought to be, this is right, this is wrong, men and women are fundamentally different, God made men different from women. There's none of that. There's none on the sort of left side of it either. It's all people telling their stories. It's all people exploring what they've, how they felt, how it's affected them, how they see it now, how their spouse sees it. And that's what I was hoping for without trying to direct it. So, Roger, your story, see, this is a long circular segue. You guys know me, you know how I go way around this. Like, how did you get back here? I wanted you to read your The Rise of the Feminine, which I think would make a great skit, a great playlist.
Okay. So I'll just read the first bit of the chapter. So it starts like this. As lockdown here in the UK began, I, like many, got involved in several new online groups. One, aimed at entrepreneurs, had this topic for its first weekly online gathering. Quotes, the rise of the feminine, close quotes. Curious about what this meant, I signed up. As the event began, I scanned the 25 Zoom boxes in front of me. I noticed most were women. I also became aware of an unease. Initially, it seemed to be connected to being in a minority, unsure whether to speak at all, and even if I did, feeling uncertain about how what I might say would be received. My unease morphed into discomfort the more attention I gave the title of the event. For instance, as a man, I wondered whether I might be in the firing line for subjugating women, for violence against women, for being a physical manifestation of a patriarchy. My palms became sweaty. I hit the mute button because I hit the mute button because much uncontrollable throat clearing began to happen. Was I about to be brainwashed? Was I witnessing the rise of a new matriarchy? Was this the beginning of the end or a new beginning completely? My mind was racing. I felt threatened. In my head, the rise of the feminine was about to leave masculinity, my masculinity at that, behind in its wake. My very identity, how I knew myself to be, felt on the line. Until it wasn't.
So,
I'll stop there.
yeah. In my time on the planet, I've had a lot of collisions between my upbringing, my training about who I was supposed to be, and a lot of discomfort between that. This is the way you're supposed to be. This is the way you are, and they seem to be getting farther apart, like a rubber band, which means they were starting to go like that. Not so much as I've gotten older, but I certainly did as a young man. And when I read The Rise of the Feminine piece about it, a lot of that, for me, it's short of trauma, but it is a lot of discomfort, came back to me without any sort of immediate pain. But I realized that how much that had been operative in my life.
Yeah. it it's funny because the event was hosted by two friends of mine. One was male, one was female, and the reaction I had to it is kind of, it illustrates what minds do, right? This energy floods in, and then our sense making begins. We start to make sense of it, and that sense making either maintains an equilibrium or it disturbs an equilibrium. And in my case, there was huge disturbance, manifest in sweaty palms and racing thoughts about what this pandemic we were all in. Remember, we were all in completely new territory we'd never been in before. And I was kind of like, what's going on? What's going on? And it wasn't comfortable to begin with, for sure. But what turned out was that the word feminine referred to energy. It didn't refer to female or male. It referred to the rise of feminine energy. It was like a call for all of us, irrespective of our gender, to access that side of ourselves that is more nurturing and caring and feminine. And what came out, the final piece I read out there, until it wasn't, the whole disturbance I was feeling inside soon began to settle, and I was able to listen and engage and not be distracted by what was going on in my inner world. As soon as I understood this was not a question of identity, it was a question of energy and how energy flows through all of us. And that's what we are. We're all balls of energy, and I mean, it was interesting that later afterwards, I started to get into this idea of the self being an illusion, which I hadn't done at the time I started these online webinars. At least I hadn't done in any depth. I'd only touched on it. But what informed me as I wrote the rest of the piece that's in the book is there's so many different ways of looking at energy, and one of them is through the prism of what is the self. If we look at self, what do we see? And when I began to, with some guidance, with some help, sort of look at that more closely, I would start to answer what is the self with questions like, well, like I'm male and I'm white and I'm stale and I'm British and I live in London and I have a Celtic, I grew up in Wales, and all of these, I was an accountant and now I'm not, and my politics are this way or that way, and but all of that were no more than labels. They're just labels. And the person I was working with pointed that out. These are just labels that we stereotype people by, and we create stories from. We have experiences of. What my troublesome experience at the start of that seminar was entirely focused around, I thought my identity was under attack. So all of those labels that I had attached to myself and I defined myself by was suddenly looked in my head. I probably didn't to anybody else on the seminar, but in my head, it was, oh my God, this is like this is like I'm being, I'm on the firing line here. It's time to sort of restore the balance. A rise of means a down. If one's rising, other one's falling. And therefore it's a. I saw it in very battle-like terms, but to some extent, that is because I was attached to such labels. And it's through looking at this question of, well, what is the self? Which is quite a deep question. But it leads one to see that these are just labels. They're nothing more than labels. And that was, rather than that being frightening, it was quite liberating. It was a kind of sense of, well, you're a ball of energy, Mac, and I'm a ball of energy, and you're a ball of energy, Colin, and I'm a ball of energy, and there will be an interaction between us that will be very dynamic and alter and shift and change and move around. And that's what to pay attention to. That's what matters. And any label has attachment and baggage and so much else to it. So I found that helpful, and that's what I've tried. I mean, there's a when you try to write about this stuff, you reach the point of ineffability. I mean, you can't find the words to convey it in any meaningful way because it's beyond words. But I've had an attempt at doing that in a succinct way I know how in the remainder of the chapter in the book.
Whew. A couple of things. One is that you just replicated verbally what you did in your contribution to the book, which was be here and go way over to there. I mean, the way it printed out on my machine, on the first page, it ends with until it wasn't. And the next thing I know, we're talking about energy, which is great because I think it needs to be one of these if it's going to break through the bullshit. And the other thing, and then I want to hear from you, Colin, if you don't mind, is that you did, from my perspective, what the subtitle of the book is about: stories of illusion and expectation, which is about the rise of the feminine, your illusion and redemption for me, which is that shift in cognition and emotion and spirit towards, wait a minute, this isn't about my masculinity.
Yeah.
It's not about men and women. It's about all of us. It's about the ball of energy. That's what this is about. And that's where, for me, the sort of redemptive nature of changing our thinking comes in, which is pretty cool. All right, Colin. I know that look.
Yeah, where do I start? Yeah, I scribbled some things down as we were talking, and I'm generally in agreement with what Roger has shared and what you've been saying. It took some time, and I would have said probably 15, maybe even longer, 20, 25 years ago, when I realized that it was a difference not between men and women, but actually masculine and feminine, and an opportunity for both the male to embrace the feminine, because that's the one we typically will have less of, and vice versa. But equally, it's not about making us equals, even though we are equal. We're not trying to make the female have an equal number of equally feminine and masculine, and vice versa, because I think we still need to have our differences, but for me it's about honoring those differences. And I go back to when I was first in work, and we had in those days a squash ladder, and I was very fit, probably okay at playing squash, but technically very average because I just hadn't had the experience. And there was a couple of ladies ahead of me, and in due course you end up playing them. And I was able to battle the first one through brute strength, but the second one, who was also very strong and had, I would say, quite masculine in some ways, I just wiped the floor with me. But there's also this other bit. It's like, I don't want to lose to a woman. I really don't want to lose to a woman. And similarly saw this with my ex-wife when she was playing snooker, and I watched her playing a game with a guy, and he won the first, she won the second, and then the third game he was desperate to win. You could see almost like the beads of sweat. I've got to win, otherwise how am I going to live this down? And then I got to meet a lady called Pauline Crawford, and it's certainly with this title someone I think you ought to at least have a contact with. And she's created something, this is her model, called gender dynamics. And when I saw this, it made me appreciate the differences much better. And so in both cases, the male and the female, you have the alpha male, but you also have the alpha female. You have the gentle male or gentleman, and likewise the gentle woman. And, you know, we are at different times on those continuums. And some will rarely be so for instance, myself, I'm more of a gentleman than an alpha male. But we all know those that are the opposite of that. And similarly with female, one particular example, the person we were consultants, and he just said to me, do not open the door for this woman. And it was like, what? Because for me, that you open the door to the woman, he said, she will not appreciate it. She was very much the alpha woman. And again, from neither side, it's this is who people are. And for me, this is all about how do we create more awareness. And I'm very much in that business of the no labels, no boxes. I mean, there's a lovely book called No More Boxes, which I probably can find it. But I know that Molly, my wife, has connected with the people who wrote it and had the various discussions. I agree very much, Roger. It's about an energy. And the more we try and put words and narrative around it, it loses its definition. It's just energy, and we know it, we feel it, we sense it, and I think that the rise of it isn't the demise of the masculine. It's more about the embracing of the feminine, and so we're both rising. So the male and the female are both rising because we're embracing the masculinity and the feminine, and we need more feminine in the world. More care, more nurturing, more empathy, more compassion, more equal, more enough is enough, and things like that.
One of the jobs I used to have was I used to be you could call it a talent spotter. So and what that effectively meant, it was working in the public service in the UK. But my job was to find future leaders and to spot people with potential, not competence to do the current job, but potential to step up into senior critical roles. And the common way in which we'd collectively thought about leadership back then, this is going back to the early noughties, was academic record was commensurate with capacity to lead. And we were knocking a hole in that theory because the method we were using looked at someone's intellect and their temperament, so their ability to analyze problems, sometimes very complex problems, sometimes very simple problems, and generate potential solutions to them. So that was the intellect side. But the temperament side was how driven were they, how resilient were they, and how much empathy did they have with people who would object to what they were coming to. And we found that people that passed those two tests often had no academic qualification at all. But they had a lot of, frontline experience in the health service or in the tax office and what have you. So, they were brilliant. They were brilliant. They had brilliant potential for leaders. But there, I think, was this balance between intellect it's not dominant in males. It's equally balanced in male and female.
Yeah.
Empathy is less dominant in males, we found, and it's more dominant in females. And the capacity to see someone's point of view other than your own is the fundamental shift, I think, that makes a difference in leaders. Because if you operate from my view is complete and right, therefore by deduction yours must be wrong.
Yeah.
You live in a very binary male female, right, black white, right wrong world. That's how you construct your reality from that. And let's face it, we're conditioned to that. We win favor from parents. We get accolades in school. We get promoted for being right. Okay, so it's no wonder that mindset is dominant, right? No wonder. But in a world that's more complex and is fast moving, no one person can be right. The old adage that 10 minds are better than one has to be true. So the shift to, from I'm right, you're wrong, to I genuinely believe, and I mean heartfelt believe, energetically believe, that collectively we can work it out in a way that not one of us can do individually. If that's the mindset, then you get to very different places. You go to very different places.
Yeah, I mean, the sense I get there is that we're talking about not horizontal development, but vertical development.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and all of those, and the expert level is is one of the floors, if you like, FLOORS.
Yeah.
And the more we can actually, both of these could be right, but they appear to be opposing.
Yeah.
And the real leaders are the ones that are able to hold any number of those in their being, if you like, and go, actually, all of these or any of these could be right.
Yeah.
So which is the one that we would like to choose? And therefore the ability to hold that, to communicate that with everyone else, create that collaboration, and create that decision of, this is what we're looking at. What do you all think? Rather than, this is what I think. Now, what do you think? So we then get the input from all of these highly paid, highly skilled, highly experienced people, rather than just the one person. And, often there's an element of this, which is the charisma that leaders, really good leaders, have. Their ability to manage that situation, but also lead the people.
Yeah, I agree. I also think the word holding is important. Holding in one's being these powers.
Yeah, because they are.
It's like when I was talking to Matt before we began this, that it's in the holding something new arises.
Yes.
And yet we often want certainty. We want a solution before we go into the holding space. Well, new answers are an emergent quality. They come out of holding these these polarized points of view. So no one can imagine an outcome unless you've been in the space where those polarities have been held.
Yeah.
It's like Mac was saying, I think the first title of this book was Lift and Carry, I think he said. Is that right?
Yeah.
And if I remember, that was about men lifting and women carrying children and bearing children and so on. And then and you'd carried that for a while, and then one day you woke up with gender crap and thought, that's the one. And it's very different, isn't it? The two that, in sitting with the one gave rise to the other one.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it in a way. It's like, it's just, and I remember you saying, Matt, once the new idea arrived, you just knew that was it.
Yeah.
Can I just pick up on just the one thing there?
Go ahead, Colin.
One of the things I read in Nancy Klein's latest book, which is The Promise That Changes Everything, I Will Not Interrupt. She says that this polarization is not about, let me get this right, it's not about disagreement, it's about disconnection.
Yeah, it's a very good distinction.
Right? And so we could sit here with three very opposing views, and all the evidence, I can find all the evidence that I'm right, and in theory, if it's a binary one, you're wrong and Mac's wrong. But if we went, actually, how do we hold all three and continue to have a dialogue, each of us throwing our pieces into the middle, rather than going, nope, because the follow on from I'm right, you're wrong is you're bad, I'm good.
Yeah.
Therefore, how do I get rid of you so that I can succeed without you damaging or coming up and all of those things?
Yeah.
And you can see how it spirals out.
Yeah. It goes beyond I'm bad, you're good too. It goes to I despise you.
Yes.
I don't even want to listen to you.
Correct. Yeah. And I can't listen to you because if I were to listen to you fully, your words might change my thinking.
Yeah.
No, I can't do that, because how would I even begin to explain that I've changed my views to my brother, my sister, my family, my friends? No. End of. I'm right, you're wrong.
And there's a magnet to that binary place.
Belonging.
It's a very powerful magnet.
Yeah.
I was taking a Tai Chi class. Tai Chi. And one of the principles of Tai Chi is called beautiful ladies' hands. The idea that you don't hold tension in your hands, that your hands are always free. And I like to play golf, though I'm a horrible golfer. And there was another guy, there's only one other guy in the class, with all the rest were women. There's no surprise. And he was kind of this kind of guy.
Yep.
And I said, do you play golf? And he said, yeah, I play golf. And I said, the idea of beautiful ladies' hands is so important for golf, because if you hold your club too tightly, you
can't move.
You're going to be terrible. So I said, that's really cool, the idea of beautiful ladies' hands when you play golf. And he said, that's really stupid. And I thought he was scared because it was beautiful ladies'
hands.
If it had been beautiful men's hands, he would have been fine. But that was over the. So
good point.
That fear of nuance, Roger, you brought that up just a bit ago. That does not have to be set in stone. It does not have to be either or. It does not have to be, Colin, you say A and I say B, and one of us must be wrong, and it ain't going to be me.
Yeah.
And not only that, but because you're wrong, as you just extended and this for me is the scary part. Not only does that mean you're wrong, but it means that you're less than I am. because you are less than I am,
Yeah.
you're not worthy of my regard. And I think
Wow.
it happens with men and women a lot. And a real quick story about that from the feminine side, and then we'll see where that goes. I have a friend who is absolutely, she's a beautiful woman, and her story, and I couldn't get her to do it for the book. I don't think she wanted to sell it or to tell it. She has a sister who's plain. So she said, my sister was the smart one, and I was the pretty one. And because I'm the pretty one, whenever I would say something intelligent, people would back away. But
Wow.
the pretty one can't be the smart one.
Mm. Yeah. And particularly if you're female, is the stereotypical.
Yeah.
You can't have beauty and brains, which is just rubbish. Just rubbish. And also the pretty ones are unapproachable. But they're like us. We're all human.
Yeah.
And you can't be strong and accepting.
Yeah. Strong and kind.
Thank you. You can't
Yeah.
be strong and
Yeah.
kind.
Yeah. I mean, I think of my daughter, who I've often mentioned as she's a children's nurse, senior children's nurse in accident and emergency, and she's tiny, but A, she knows her stuff. B, she's not afraid to confront the doctors, which typically are male. And they have this view, which is, I'm right, you're wrong. And she said, no, excuse me, you might believe that because you're from adults, but in children, we have to do it this way. Rah. Okay. And she will also say, because of the situation that's happened, I have to report this. And they go, oh yeah, whatever. Usually, and pretty much every time she's told me these stories, a couple of days later they bump into her again and they say, hey, I'm really sorry. You were absolutely right. Thank you for calling me out and having the courage to call me out, because people don't do that. I mean, it's better these days than it used to be, obviously, here. But in the NHS, it was always the doctor or the surgeon was right. And just one in a role play situation.
Good for your daughter, Colin.
Oh,
Good for your
yeah.
daughter. Yeah.
There was one particular time where they were doing role plays, and her, I think at least 2 or even 3 bands above her, was playing the role of the parent of the child that was in this thing. And so Katie said to her, has anyone asked you anything about the situation? And she said, no, nobody has. So she talked to her a little bit about it, and she found out something that the consultant who was about to make the diagnosis or do the operation or whatever. And she said, I need to say something. And so she said, excuse me, I understand this, something is different to what we believed. And he deliberately brushed her off and said, you don't know what you're talking about. Forget it. It's okay. I've got this under control. And it was deliberate to see what she would do. And to her credit, and for her, the lady who was the boss of, the higher band, was delighted that she did it. She said, no, excuse me, this is the situation. And she was really firm about it. And he went, right. Okay, thank you. And she got praised for it by the band, whatever it was above her, for explaining it in and delivering it in that way and not backing off.
Oh, were that the norm, eh? Oh, were that the norm?
Oh, yeah. Just and trust. And so she's getting, I think they more and more they're recognizing and valuing the nurses because they know they know the children's procedures and the dosages and all of the little things that need to happen that are different to adults. So
they're the sergeants and the corporals.
yeah.
Right. I think. And I am often accused of being too idealistic, which is, I mean, I love it. It's like, no, I'm not idealistic enough. Damn it! My my grandchildren, the oldest of whom is 25, the youngest of whom is 17, and my stepson, who's in his early 30s, are my hope for the future because
Yeah.
they have less of the kind of baggage, I think, that than we're talking about.
Agreed.
It is, things like race and gender. I mean, when I went to my oldest grandson's graduation from middle school, which is what, ninth grade or something like that, there were no two kids in his class who looked alike. I mean, they were from all over the world. They were all heights
Oh,
and all
right.
shapes and all
Yeah.
sizes, and it was like going to the going to the UN in like 1960. And
Yes.
when I went to high school, there was white kids and there was black kids. There were a lot more white kids and black kids, and we sat in different parts, and we didn't mix and match.
Yeah.
And maybe our conversation today and this conversation isn't just three old guys talking about the way it was and the way it could be. Maybe it's because we're realizing that it is opening up, and
Yeah.
instead of fighting for that again or against that, maybe the battle to fight is accepting that.
Yeah. Embracing it.
Yeah, embracing it. It's like, ain't this cool?
Yeah. But there was a, I mean, this is a little bit way back, but probably only about 15 years ago. And we'd gone to see some friends, and there was either 6 or 8 of their children and children's friends
Right.
staying over, and girls and boys, and they're all going to sleep in the same room.
Yeah.
And it was, and they were going, well, is this a good idea? We said, they're very okay with it. We've got the problem, not them. There was nothing, if you like, going on, should we say, but they've respected each other, and it was okay to do that and to be in the same room, sleeping together, not sleeping together, but you know what I mean, sleeping in the same room.
I've seen that with my grandchildren. It's like, it's not an issue. Just not.
Yeah, yeah. Grow up, Dad.
I was going to say, when you were talking about um, no face the same in your school, I've only been living in London since about 2010. Before that, I was living in another Woodstock, not the Woodstock you were familiar with, in 1968,
69.
69. Although I've been to that Woodstock too, up in upstate New York. But I used to live in a place called Woodstock in England, which is like a quintessential Cotswold town. And it was very rural and not very cosmopolitan at all. And then I came to London in 2010, and the diversity here is huge, and I love it. I love the fact, we can go around to neighbors who are Indian and they'll cook lovely Indian food, and we've got neighbors that are Chinese and German and American, and it's people from all over the world. And I just love that sense that your grandson had in his classroom. We have it in the street, it's lovely.
Well, I had asked you to, and you had asked to as well, to read that Bill Bryson quote
Yeah, let me close with that.
to close us out. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So this is Bill Bryson from a book called The Body, A Guide to Occupants is the book. And I remember when I first read this quote, I thought, oh, that just sort of struck to my very core. And I often, if we're doing some work with people, intensive work with people, I often read it out to people. And it has a similar effect on them as well. But let me read it to you. Take a moment from time to time to remember that you are alive. I know this sounds a trifle obvious, But it is amazing how little time we take to remark upon this singular and gratifying fact. By the most astounding stroke of luck, an infinitesimal portion of all the matter in the universe came together to create you. And for the tiniest moment in the great span of eternity, you have the incomparable privilege to exist. For endless eons, there was no you. Before you know it, you will cease to be again. And in between, you have this wonderful opportunity to see and feel and think and do. Whatever else you do with your life, nothing will remotely compare with the incredible accomplishment of having managed to get yourself born. Congratulations. Well done. You really are special.
Perfect.
A great way to finish.
Perfect way to finish. I will, this is recorded. I will send you each a copy.
Great.
Yeah,
Cole, onward.
indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.